You know that moment when someone calls you obsolete right to your face? Yeah, that happened to me 8 weeks ago, getting dressed down by a 32-year-old MBA in front of my entire engineering team, the same team I'd been training for the past decade. I'm Bill Patterson, by the way, 52 years old, been working gas conversion systems since Clinton was president. 25 years at Midwest Energy Solutions, and I thought I'd seen everything. Boy, was I wrong. The whole mess started when they brought in Chelsea Rodriguez as our new COO. Harvard MBA, consultancy background, the works. She showed up with a briefcase full of efficiency metrics and a head full of ideas about modernizing legacy operations. Should have been my first warning right there. Chelsea was smart, I'll give her that. But there's a big difference between smart and experienced, and she was about to learn that the hard way. See, our plant was in the middle of a massive conversion project. We were switching from coal to natural gas, which sounds simple until you realize you're basically rebuilding the guts of a $150 million facility while keeping the lights on for half the state. The EPA was watching every move, the unions were tracking everything, and one screw-up could shut us down permanently. I'd been the lead engineer on this project from day one. Hell, I'd written most of the safety protocols myself. But Chelsea had other ideas about how things should work. It happened in the main conference room on a Tuesday morning. Chelsea had called what she liked to call a big meeting to discuss cutting costs. Translation, she wanted to figure out who to fire. I walked in with my usual clipboard and the latest pressure readings from the conversion units. The numbers weren't great. We'd been running into issues with the gas mixture ratios, and I'd been tracking some worrying fluctuations in the secondary containment systems. Nothing catastrophic yet, but the kind of thing that keeps you awake at night when you actually understand how these systems work. Chelsea was at the head of the table, laptop open, looking like she was about to solve world hunger with a PowerPoint. The engineering team was scattered around, guys I'd worked with for years, some of them apprentices I'd trained from scratch. "Bill," she said, not looking up from her screen, "I've been reviewing your reports, and I'm concerned about the timeline. We're 3 weeks behind schedule on the conversion testing." I set my clipboard down. "The delays are because we're finding issues with the gas flow calibration. If we rush this, we could have serious safety problems." She finally looked at me, and I didn't like what I saw in her eyes. "Safety problems, or are you just resistant to change?" The room got quiet. "I'm sorry," I said. "Bill, you've been doing things the same way for 25 years. Sometimes fresh perspectives can spot efficiencies that experience might miss." I wasn't happy about that. These aren't efficiency issues, these are physics issues. Gas doesn't care about your timeline, that's when she said it. The words that ended my career at Midwest Energy and started something else entirely. "Bill, let's be honest here. You're a dinosaur stuck in the past. We need people who can adapt to modern methods, not someone who thinks every change is dangerous because that's how we've always done it." Dinosaur. She called me a dinosaur in front of my team. Guys who'd seen me crawl into burning boilers and troubleshoot systems that could have killed us all if I'd made one wrong move. I looked around the table. These weren't just coworkers, they were my guys. Mike Santos, who I'd taught how to read pressure differentials. Tony Kowalski, who'd called me at 2 a.m. more times than I could count when something went wrong on the night shift. Even the younger guys, the ones fresh out of engineering school who still thought textbooks had all the answers. Nobody said anything after that. They just looked at their hands or their laptops or anywhere that wasn't my face. "I see," I said. I closed my clipboard and stood up. "Well, if that's how you feel." "Bill, don't be dramatic. I'm just saying we need to embrace. No need to explain." I picked up my things. "I think I understand perfectly." As I walked toward the door, Chelsea's voice followed me. "I hope you'll reconsider your attitude. This project needs team players." I stopped at the door and turned around. "You're right about one thing. This project does need someone who understands it. Good luck with that." 2 days later, I was in HR getting what they called my exit interview. They offered me a voluntary resignation package, which was corporate speak for leave quietly or we'll make things difficult. I took the package, 25 years of service, and they walked me out with a cardboard box like I'd been stealing office supplies. But here's the thing about being a dinosaur in the energy business. Sometimes the old ways exist for good reasons. And sometimes those reasons become very, very important when the young, smart people start changing things they don't understand. I went home to my garage and my 1967 Mustang. 40 years of marriage had taught me that when life kicks you in the teeth, You either fix something with your hands or you drink. Since it was Thursday afternoon, I chose the Mustang. I was under the hood, working on the carburetor, when my phone rang. It was Mike Santos. "Bill, you need to know something. Chelsea's brought in a consulting team to streamline the conversion process. They're talking about bypassing some of your safety checks." I wiped my hands on a rag. "Which ones?" "The secondary containment monitoring. They're saying it's redundant because the primary system has automated alerts." That worried me. "Mike, listen to me very carefully. Those secondary monitors aren't redundant. They're measuring different things. If they bypass those systems and we get a pressure spike—" "I know, Bill. That's why I'm calling. What do I do?" That's when I realized something. Chelsea might have called me a dinosaur, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She assumed that getting rid of me meant getting rid of my knowledge. But knowledge isn't just in the person. It's in the relationships, the documentation, the systems that person built over 25 years. "Mike, do you still have access to the EPA compliance database?" "Yeah. Why?" "Pull up file number EPA 47291 MES. Read me the section about secondary monitoring requirements." I heard typing, then a long whistle. "Jesus, Bill. It says any facility processing more than 750 cubic feet per minute of natural gas must maintain independent secondary monitoring with manual oversight capability. It's federal law." That's right. And Mike? That law exists because 12 years ago a plant in Texas bypassed their secondary monitors to save money. 3 people died in the explosion. What do you want me to do? Document everything, every meeting, every decision, every time someone tells you to ignore a safety protocol. And Mike, keep my number handy. Over the next 3 weeks, I got more calls. Tony Kowalski called to tell me about pressure fluctuations that the new consulting team said were within acceptable limits. Janet Walsh from Quality Control called to ask about documentation that Chelsea's team couldn't locate. Even some of the union guys started reaching out, asking questions about procedures that suddenly nobody seemed to understand. I helped where I could, but I was careful. I wasn't an employee anymore, so I couldn't directly interfere. But I could answer questions. I could point people toward the right documentation. And I could make sure that when things went wrong, and they were going to go wrong, there would be a paper trail. Week 4 brought more problems. The consulting team had convinced Chelsea that several legacy procedures were slowing down the conversion timeline. They started eliminating what they called redundant safety checks and outdated documentation requirements. What they were really doing was dismantling a system that had taken me 15 years to perfect. Mike called me on a Wednesday. "Bill, they've cut the inspection schedule in half. Instead of daily pressure checks, they're doing them every 3 days." "Mike, those daily checks aren't just bureaucracy. Gas pressure can spike in hours, not days." I tried to tell them that. Chelsea said I was being obstructionist. That word again. Anyone who questioned the new methods was being obstructionist. By week 5, the calls were coming daily. Janet Walsh told me they'd eliminated the manual backup systems for the gas flow monitors. Tony reported that the consulting team had removed the requirement for 2-person authorization on pressure valve adjustments. Each change by itself might seem small, but together they were creating a situation that could kill people. The really frustrating part? I could see it all coming, but I couldn't do anything about it. Every time I tried to warn someone, they'd say, "But, Bill, you don't work here anymore." Week 6 is when things started getting serious. Mike called me on a Friday evening, and I could hear the worry in his voice. "Bill, we had an incident today. Nothing major, but the pressure spiked in Unit 3, and it took 20 minutes to get it under control." 20 minutes? Mike, with the old protocols, that should have been corrected in 5, I know. But the consulting team said the delay was because we were following outdated emergency procedures. What did Larry Morrison say? Larry was the plant manager, old school like me. Larry's been pushed aside. Chelsea's handling all operational decisions now. That's when I knew we were headed for real trouble. Larry had 30 years of experience and knew how to smell danger. If they'd sidelined him, it meant the consulting team had complete control. "Mike, I need you to start documenting everything. Times, dates, who made what decisions. If something big happens, you'll need that information." "You think something big is going to happen?" I looked out at my garage, at the Mustang I'd been working on for months. Sometimes the old things are the ones that last because they're built right. "Mike, When you remove all the safety systems from a complex machine, something always happens. It's just a matter of when. The call I'd been expecting came on Monday morning of week 7. I was having coffee, reading the paper, when my phone lit up with Mike's number. "Bill, we've got a big problem. Really big." "How big?" "EPA showed up this morning. Unannounced inspection. And Bill, the secondary monitoring system has been offline for 4 days." I set down my coffee cup. "Offline how?" "Completely down. Chelsea's consulting team said it was scheduled maintenance, but they never filed the proper notifications with the EPA. "Where's Chelsea?" "Conference in Denver. Left Friday." Of course she did. When the real work needed to be done, the consultants were nowhere to be found. Mike, listen carefully. Do not, under any circumstances, let them run the conversion units while those monitors are offline. The EPA inspector will shut down the entire plant if they find out you've been operating without secondary containment monitoring. It might be too late for that, Bill. They've been running tests all week. I felt my stomach drop. Get me Janet Walsh on the phone. Now. Janet was the head of quality control, and more importantly, she was the one person in that plant who'd never been impressed by MBA degrees or consulting buzzwords. When Mike conferenced her in, she sounded exhausted. "Bill, thank God. These people are crazy. They've been overriding safety protocols all week, and when I try to explain why those protocols exist, they tell me I'm being obstructionist. Janet, I need you to do something for me. Remember the documentation protocols I set up for federal inspections? The ones Chelsea said were outdated? Those are the ones. I need you to pull every safety override from the past month and document them according to federal standards. Every single one. Bill, that could take hours. Janet, if the EPA finds out what's been happening, hours of paperwork will be the least of everyone's problems." 2 hours later, my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Mike or Janet. It was Larry Morrison, the plant manager. Larry was old school, a guy who'd worked his way up from the shop floor and understood that fancy degrees don't mean much when you're dealing with explosive gases and federal regulators. "Bill, I need to ask you something, and I need a straight answer." "Shoot." "If I told you we've been running conversion tests for 4 days without secondary monitoring and the EPA inspector just found out about it, what would you say?" I closed my eyes. "I'd say you're looking at a minimum $47 million fine based on current EPA violation schedules and a possible plant shutdown." That's what I thought. "Bill, I know things ended badly with you and Chelsea, but I need your help. This inspector is asking questions that nobody here can answer, and Chelsea won't be back until Wednesday." Here's where I could have been petty. I could have told Larry that I was just a dinosaur who didn't understand modern methods. I could have reminded him that nobody had bothered to defend me when Chelsea was trashing my reputation in front of my own team. But that's not who I am. When people are in danger, you help, even if those people didn't help you when you needed it. "Larry, put me on speaker with the EPA inspector." 20 minutes later, I was in my truck, driving back to the plant I'd been escorted out of just 7 weeks earlier. The EPA inspector, a serious woman named Patricia Hendricks, had asked me to come in as a consulting expert to help them understand the technical complexities of the conversion system. Walking back into that plant felt strange. Everything looked the same, but it felt different, smaller, maybe. Or maybe I was seeing it with different eyes. Mike met me at the security desk. "Bill, I can't tell you how glad I am to see you." "How bad is it, Mike?" "Pretty bad. They've got the main conversion unit offline, and they're talking about shutting down the entire operation pending a full safety review." We walked through the facility together, and I could see the problems immediately. Pressure readings that were technically within tolerance but uncomfortably close to the danger zone. Secondary systems that had been bypassed or ignored. Documentation that was incomplete or missing entirely. But the real problem wasn't technical, it was cultural. In 7 weeks, Chelsea and her consulting team had managed to create an environment where people were afraid to raise safety concerns, where questioning procedures was seen as resistance to change rather than good sense. Patricia Hendricks was in the main control room, reviewing documentation with a grim expression. She looked up when I walked in. "Mr. Patterson, thank you for coming. I understand you were the lead engineer on this conversion project. That's right. Can you explain to me why critical safety monitoring was disabled without proper notification to federal regulators?" I looked around the room. Chelsea wasn't there, obviously, but several of her consulting team members were standing nearby, looking nervous. One of them, a young guy in an expensive suit, stepped forward. "Inspector Hendricks, the monitoring system was offline for scheduled maintenance. It's a routine procedure." Patricia looked at me. "Mr. Patterson, is that accurate?" "No, ma'am, it's not. The secondary monitoring system I designed for this facility doesn't require offline maintenance. It's designed to be serviced while operational specifically to avoid this kind of situation." The consultant's face went red. "That's not what our analysis showed. Your analysis was wrong." I turned to Patricia. "Inspector, the secondary monitoring system tracks gas mixture ratios in real time. If those ratios drift outside safe parameters during conversion, the primary system might not detect the change quickly enough to prevent a pressure spike. That's why federal regulations require manual oversight capability." Patricia made notes. "And without this monitoring? Without it, you're essentially flying blind." The plant in Beaumont, Texas, had a similar failure in 2011. 3 fatalities. The room got very quiet. Patricia spent the next 4 hours going through every system, every procedure, every decision that had been made since I'd left. And with each revelation, the scope of the problem became clearer. It wasn't just the monitoring system. Chelsea's team had bypassed multiple safety protocols in the name of efficiency. They'd eliminated redundancies, streamlined procedures, and modernized systems without understanding why those systems existed in the first place. By the end of the day, Patricia had enough documentation to justify shutting down the entire plant indefinitely, but she didn't. Instead, she did something interesting. "Mr. Patterson, I'm prepared to allow this facility to continue operating under specific conditions. First, all safety systems must be restored to full operational status within 48 hours. Second, all future modifications to safety protocols must be approved by a qualified engineer with demonstrated expertise in gas conversion systems. Third, that engineer must be given full authority over safety decisions, independent of operational management." She looked directly at me. "Would you be willing to serve in that capacity?" Larry Morrison, who'd been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. "Inspector, Mr. Patterson is no longer employed by this company. Then I suggest you fix this mess. Otherwise, this facility remains offline until you find someone equally qualified. And Mr. Morrison, based on what I've seen today, that could take months." That evening, I was back in my garage, but this time I wasn't working on the Mustang. I was sitting on an old stool, drinking a beer, and thinking about phone calls. The first call had come from Larry Morrison. The board of directors had held an emergency meeting and authorized him to offer me whatever it took to come back. Department director, full autonomy over all safety systems, a salary that jumped from $85,000 to $240,000. The second call had been from Mike Santos. "Bill, you should have seen it. Chelsea came back from Denver to find half the plant shut down and the EPA camped out in her office. They told her the only way to avoid a complete shutdown was to bring you back. She looked like someone had told her the building was on fire." The third call was the one I was still thinking about. It was from Chelsea herself. "Bill, I think there may have been some misunderstanding about your departure. I'd like to discuss bringing you back in a consulting capacity to help resolve this EPA problem." Misunderstanding. After calling me a dinosaur in front of my team, she was calling it a misunderstanding. "Chelsea," I'd said, "I think the communication was pretty clear. You said I was stuck in the past and couldn't adapt to modern methods." "Bill, let's not get bogged down in details. We have a situation here that requires your expertise." "No, Chelsea, you have a situation that could have been avoided if you'd listened to the dinosaur who'd been doing this job since before you graduated high school." There was a long pause. "What do you want, Bill?" "I want a written apology to my engineering team for the way you handled my departure. I want full authority over all safety decisions, and I want you to understand that safety protocols aren't suggestions." "Done." "When can you start?" "I'll be there Monday morning." That was 1 week ago. I've been back at the plant, working with my team to restore the systems that should never have been changed. The EPA lifted their shutdown order, and we passed our follow-up inspection with no violations. Chelsea and I maintain what you might call a professional relationship. She handles the business side, I handle the technical side, and we both stay in our lanes. She hasn't called me a dinosaur again, and I haven't had to remind her why some of us old-timers are still around. The consulting team? They finished their efficiency review and moved on to their next project. probably making the same mistakes somewhere else. But the best part happened yesterday. Tony Kowalski brought his son around the plant. Kid studying engineering, wants to know how things really work. As I was showing him the secondary monitoring system, Tony said something that made me smile. "Billy, this is Bill Patterson. He's the guy who knows where all the bodies are buried." His son looked confused. "Bodies? It's an expression, kid," I said. "It means I know how things really work around here. And if you're smart, you'll learn that knowledge isn't about having all the latest technology. It's about understanding why things are built the way they are." The kid nodded seriously. "Are you going to teach me?" I looked at Tony, then back at his son. "Kid, that's exactly what I'm here for. Look, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying the old ways are always the best ways, but I am saying that experience matters. That understanding why something works is more important than just knowing that it works." Chelsea learned that lesson the hard way. She thought she could replace 25 years of experience with a PowerPoint presentation and some consulting buzzwords. Turns out, when you're dealing with systems that can explode and kill people, experience isn't just valuable, it's essential. The funny thing is, I don't think Chelsea's a bad person. She's smart, she works hard, and she genuinely wants the company to succeed. Her mistake was thinking that new automatically means better, and that anyone who questions change is just stuck in the past. Sometimes being a dinosaur isn't about being extinct. Sometimes it's about being the thing that survived when everything else couldn't adapt. And sometimes the old ways are the old ways because they work. These days, when new people join the team, I make sure they understand something. Respect the systems that came before you, learn why they exist, and think very carefully before you change them. Because the next time someone calls you a dinosaur, you can remind them that dinosaurs ruled the earth for 165 million years. We must have been doing something right.